Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to really get into something fascinating, maybe a bit perplexing, about large language models, LLMs. We
Mm,
all hear how incredibly good they are at, finding stuff, pulling specific facts out of just mountains of text.
absolutely.
But our deep dive today looks at a surprising blind spot, their struggle to notice what isn't actually there.
That's exactly right. And our focus for this is a study called AbsenceBench. It's detailed in a paper. AbsenceBench. Language models can't tell what's missing.
Catchy title.
It is. And it really challenges some basic assumptions we might have about how well these models comprehend things.
Okay.
So our mission here is to pull out the key insights, the most important nuggets from this research to help you understand this really critical and honestly pretty counterintuitive limitation.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So, many of you listening have probably heard of the needle in a haystack test, right?
Yeah.
NIH.
Classic benchmark.
Yeah, exactly. It's where you basically hide some tiny specific bit of info deep inside a huge document. We're talking potentially millions of tokens.
These are like words or parts of words, chunks of text.
Right, and you ask the LLM, find that needle. And the amazing thing is they've become, well, almost superhuman at it.
So you really have.
Finding that specific thing with incredible accuracy, even in these just gigantic digital haystacks.
And it's important to remember, the needle in a haystack test, it's specifically designed to see if a model can detect presence.
Right, is the thing there.
Exactly. Can it locate and retrieve something that's explicitly written down? It's, the established benchmark for checking how well they understand long texts, and models keep getting better and better at it.
Okay, so they're champs at finding what is there, which naturally leads to the flip side question that AbsenceBench asks.
Like a verse question, yeah.
Can LLMs spot information that's been clearly deliberately left out? And this is where it gets really interesting. So what did AbsenceBench actually ask the models to do?
Well, it sounds simple, but the implications are pretty big. The task itself is quite straightforward.
Okay.
Give the LLM two things, an original document, and then a version of that same document, but with certain parts intentionally removed.
Okay, got it. Original and modified.
Precisely. And the model's job is to identify exactly what was taken out.
Not just that something's missing, but what?
Exactly what. And they tested this across three pretty different areas. There was poetry, where lines were removed,
Heck.
numerical sequences, missing numbers, and GitHub pull requests, where specific changed lines were omitted.
Diverse examples. And how much text are we talking about?
The average context length, so the size of the documents they were looking at, was around 5,000 tokens.
Which is not small, but compared to the million token NIAH tests.
Right. It positions AbsenceBench as more of a, let's say, medium context benchmark. Not short, but not enormous either.
And the results, this is the surprising part, right?
Yeah, this is the core finding. Even the really advanced state-of-the-art models did, well, poorly. Surprisingly poorly.
You'd think spotting a missing line in 5,000 tokens would be easy for something that reads millions.
You would. But take Claude 3.7 Sonnet. Even using what they call inference time compute.
Which means it gets extra thinking time, basically.
Sort of, yeah. It can generate intermediate steps or thoughts to figure out the answer. But even with that extra help, it only hit a 69.6% F1 score.
And F1 is like a combined score for accuracy and completeness.
That's right. So under 70% is, well, it's not great for these top models on a medium-sized task.
And wasn't one domain particularly bad?
Oh, yeah. The GitHub pull requests, that seemed especially tough. The very best score achieved there was only 40.0%.
Wow, 40%.
It's a stark contrast when you compare it back to the needle in a haystack results.
Right.
Take Mixtral 8x7b. That model gets a perfect score, 100%, on NIH at that same kind of context length, around 5K tokens.
Perfect score finding the needle.
But on AbsenceBench, it only managed a 14.7% F1 score.
14.7, that's a huge drop.
It's massive. On average, across the models they tested, there was a 56.9% drop in F1 score when they switched from a presence-finding task, like NIAH, to this absence-finding task.
Almost 60% worse.
Yeah. It strongly suggests that, finding what's missing is just fundamentally a harder problem for these architectures than finding what's there. It's a different kind of cognitive lift for them.
So, okay, what does this actually mean? Why? Why do these LLMs, these amazing pattern matchers, struggle so much with something that feels, well, simple to a human? Like, I know when a line's missing from a familiar poem, my brain flags it.
And you've landed right on the main hypothesis the researchers put forward.
Okay.
The thinking is that the core mechanism, the transformer attention, the part that's supposed to focus on relevant bits of the input text,
Yeah.
it has real difficulty attending to gaps,
Well,
to absences, because unlike information that is present, which corresponds to actual tokens, actual keys, the model can attend to.
yeah, something tangible.
An absence doesn't really have a direct representation. There's no specific key for nothing that the attention mechanism can easily lock onto. It's trying to connect with something that, by definition, isn't there.
Huh. That actually makes a strange kind of sense, like trying to grab smoke. And they had evidence for this idea, right?
They did, yeah. They ran an experiment that seems to back this up quite strongly.
What did they do?
They tried adding explicit placeholder strings, like literally putting in missing line, or maybe just right where the information had been taken out.
Ah, so giving the model something to see in the empty space.
Exactly. And guess what? Performance shot up dramatically.
Really?
Yeah, the improvement averaged 35.7% across the board just by adding those placeholders.
Wow, over 35% better just by marking the gap.
And one model, Llama 4 Maverick, showed the biggest jump, 54.5% improvement overall.
Incredible. So it's like the placeholder acts as a signpost, something the attention can finally see and register as, something's supposed to be here.
That seems to be the idea. And, there are other interesting, sometimes counterintuitive findings, too.
Like what?
Well, remember that inference time compute we mentioned? The extra thinking steps.
Yeah, the one that gave Claude a bit of a boost, but not much.
Right. It offered a modest improvement on average, about 7.9%. But the cost was really high.
Cost in terms of...
Computation. The models generated, on average, 8,000 thinking tokens, these internal steps, to get that small boost.
8,000, but the documents were only 5,000 tokens on average.
Exactly. Nearly 3 times the length of the document itself in just internal thought. And Gemini 2.5 Flash, which did pretty well overall, had the highest ratio, 5.7 times the document length in thinking tokens.
Whoa. That is incredibly inefficient. A lot of work for a small gain. What else was surprising?
Okay, this is kind of weird. The omission rate. How much stuff was actually missing?
Oh.
Counterintuitively, the models did worse when the omission rate was lower.
Wait, worse when less was missing? That seems backwards.
It does, right. But it suggests that having lots of small, scattered, missing bits is actually harder for the models to detect than, say, one big consecutive chunk being gone.
Like spotting individual missing bricks is harder than noticing a whole missing section of wall.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
It seems that way. And one more thing. Prompt placement really mattered.
How you ask the question.
Or rather, where you put the instructions. They found that using a post-instruction template where the task instructions came after the original and modified documents.
Instead of before.
Right. That actually led to worse performance in the poetry and number sequence tests.
Huh. So just changing the order of instructions and documents messed them up?
Significantly in some cases. It really highlights how sensitive these models can be to the input structure and how easily they can get sort of thrown off track.
Okay, so if we step back and connect this to the bigger picture, what does this fundamental problem, this difficulty seeing absence, actually mean for how we use LLMs, especially as we rely on them more and more?
Well, it raises a really important question, doesn't it?
It feels like it.
If these models can't reliably notice when crucial information isn't there, can we really trust them for certain critical tasks?
What kind of tasks?
Think about things like LLM as a judge, where a model might evaluate legal arguments or evidence, or grading student essays, or complex legal reasoning, even detecting misinformation.
Because in all those cases, what's missing can be just as important, maybe more important than what's present.
Exactly. A missing piece of evidence, a flaw in logic because a step was omitted, a news report leaving out crucial context, recognizing that absence is often key.
Yeah.
And if LLMs fundamentally struggle with that, that's a pretty significant red flag for those kinds of high-stakes applications.
It really underscores how different their intelligence is from ours, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
They can be superhuman at one thing, like finding that needle, but then completely stumble on a concept like absence that seems, basic to human understanding.
It's a stark reminder that their thinking process operates on fundamentally different principles than ours.
Right.
They aren't just scaled-up human brains.
Right.
And this difference, it has real implications for how we even evaluate these models.
Because current tests are mostly looking for presence.
Exactly. Most standard benchmarks focus heavily on detecting presence, finding information that is in the text. The researchers argue this makes current evaluations potentially misleading.
If they ignore this whole other dimension of understanding.
Precisely. They propose AbsenceBench as really just a starting point.
Hmm.
We need to develop absence-aware architectures models
Yeah.
designed to handle this better, and also absence-aware evaluation. That's a key area for future work if we want systems we can truly understand and ultimately trust.
So, recapping our deep dive today, LLMs, amazing as they are at finding things, have this really significant, kind of startling blind spot. They struggle to tell what's missing.
Unless you literally draw them a map to the empty space with a placeholder.
Right. Which leaves us with, I think, a pretty provocative thought to mull over. What does it really mean for the future, for the trustworthiness of AI, if these systems fundamentally struggle with the concept of what is not there? Especially when, as we've discussed, that absence can often be just as crucial as everything that is present.